All right, everyone. As you all know, we called this emergency session here tonight because we had a regularly scheduled phone bank for the North Carolina Democratic Party that took off with so much interest from folks across the country that after last Friday's Court of Appeals decision came down and decided that they were going to appeal the Wake County Superior Court decision that ruled in favor of the voters in North Carolina. Two Republican judges ruled that over 65,000 voters whose ballots were already counted would have to go back and reprove their eligibility over 5 months after an election. And just moments ago today, the North Carolina Supreme Court issued a stay in this fight and making sure that they have the opportunity to hear this case before the North Carolina Supreme Court. And so again, we are excited to have all of you on here tonight, but we also want to be able to explain to you all what's happening in live time, how you all can best help North Carolina, because we know that some folks heard 15 days and they freaked out and made sure that they had all hands on deck ready to mobilize in the state. But we are excited to be here with you all tonight to talk about how you can help North Carolina in the future and also get a live update from the most amazing fighter that we have in this party right now, our fantastic Supreme Court Justice Allison Riggs, who won her seat fairly on the courts, that has been carrying on her back this fight for the last 5 months, extending out past our election cycle. And so we're honored to be joined by her tonight, and we're going to hear a live update from her about the fight right now and going forward. And then Justice Riggs has got another event to go to, of course, with her very busy schedule. And so Kat Lawson and the officers of the state party are going to stay on to be able to help answer questions that you all have in the chat box as well. So Justice Riggs, I'm going to turn it over to you, and thank you for being here tonight and making time to be with us.
There is nowhere else in this whole wide world that I would be this evening, Anderson. Thank you so much for your support, for the kind info. And oh my goodness, everyone, thank you so much for being on here on short notice with rapidly changing circumstances. I want to give you a sense of what's happening, what I expect to happen in the next few days, and what we're going to do over the long term. And I only can do this because I have y'all. Like, there is no one else in the world than North Carolina Democrats and our supporters across this country that I would rather be doing hard things with. So thank you. So let me start from Friday afternoon. You all have sent me so much love, so much eagerness to keep fighting, and I'm incredibly grateful for it. On Friday, as a reminder, the North Carolina Court of Appeals, for the first time in history, gave some credence to my opponent's arguments that you can toss or invalidate or cancel 68,000 ballots 5 months after an election. Obviously, that's wrong, and I'm going to fight tooth and nail to prove that that is wrong. The Court of Appeals also created this cure process, and it's in its order ill-defined and not sort of self-effectuating. So it didn't sort of automatically go into effect. So me, my legal team are incredible data experts, leaders at NCDP, partners from across the country, folks who were doing our Chase and Cure program in the fall after the election, which was so incredibly powerful and built infrastructure for the long term for progressive candidates to win. We have been working tirelessly all weekend to make sure that we do two things. We're Democrats. We walk and chew gum at the same time. We can both chase and cure ballots and fight like hell in a court of law, but we have to do it smartly. We know we're hard fighters. We got to be strategic. So what we've been focusing on is figuring out how best to structure this cure program, because the State Board of Elections has told the court and has told us that it has data for 30,000 of the 68,000 people that my opponent is trying to cancel the votes of. And so we need to make sure that, one, if we are only chasing 68,000 people, or chasing 38,000 people instead of 68,000 people, that's a way more efficient use of our time. We also need to make sure that we are giving voters correct information. And I know the State Board of Elections put out some information on Friday we're working with the state board to make sure that they put out the best information. I remain unconvinced that a new registration is the way to deal with this. So through the proper channels, it's weird because I'm a party in litigation, but we are working to get the best information for voters who are not missing the data, but are on the Griffin list to be able to know that. Two, for you who are so eager to help that, and it makes me cry with joy and honor that you trust me to fight this fight. I know you elected me because you knew I would fight like hell for your constitutional rights. And I fought like hell in the campaign because I knew you would have my back no matter what, and that the NCDP would have my back no matter what. We are just getting our ducks in a row. We were also asking over the weekend the Supreme Court to stay the decision. So I knew we were probably going to have a little bit more time to build out this plan of attack. And I think it comes from running a nonprofit for so many years. Like, I am frugal and strategic. So I want to make sure our resources are going towards building an infrastructure that will last, and that we do this in a way that will benefit all of us going forward. So what I anticipate happening is, right now, the North Carolina Supreme Court has in front of it what's called a petition for discretionary review. So that means the Supreme Court is considering whether or not to take up my case. There's two outcomes that could happen from that. They could deny the petition for discretionary review, and that means the Court of Appeals decision stands, in which case I've told every court I'm going straight to federal court the next hour. That is where this fight is going to end, and I am ready for this. We have been prepared every step of the way for all of this. So if they deny the petition for discretionary review, and I don't think they should, but if they do, we're going to be ready, and we're going to keep up the legal fight. If they allow the petition for discretionary review, if they take up the case, I would expect there to be some kind of expedited briefing and argument process. So I don't know exactly what that looks like. Are we talking about 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 2 months, 3 months? I've been trying to tell people, I don't have a crystal ball. I think that the state court process has still got some time left before we then go to federal court if we need to defend the right of every single eligible voter to vote. And y'all, my parents are on the list. I am not letting my parents get run over by this train, I promise you. And I feel just as strongly about every single one of your rights. So this is a righteous fight. It's a fight worth having. I will ride out this state court proceeding as long as it takes, and I will exercise my right to take this back to federal court. I know that I will be in partnership with NCDP, with other groups who are representing voters and lifting up the travesty of what's happening here in North Carolina, and we will keep pushing on that. We are still going to do chase and cure. Regardless of what happens in the legal frame, we're going to always protect all of our voters, right? We're not as rushed now, but we're going to make sure that no one can attack any of our voters. We know that when we organize, we win. We know that you all worked tirelessly last year to canvass. We know you worked tirelessly to organize your county parties and your precincts. We know you worked tirelessly in canvass. You did chase and cure provisional ballots. You went out to recounts. You went out to county canvasses. We saw it. We appreciate it. I appreciate it. We're building on that going forward. And I am entirely committed to making sure that every eligible voter is in good standing with boards of elections going forward. This is an opportunity for us in a way. I mean, It sucks. It's not normal. It's not right. But we're going to turn lemons into lemonade. I will not give 1 inch. Everything that's happening is things we were expected and were prepared for. And I don't want anyone to lose any enthusiasm or any belief in our ability to land this plane because we are doing things thoughtfully and building out an infrastructure that will pay dividends well beyond this election. Because you all know, just like I do, this isn't about my seat. This isn't about my race. It's about the very soul of democracy. And if people who have power can toss ballots after an election because they don't like who won, or they don't like how those people voted, then our democracy dies. So we are fighting for something that it doesn't end here. It's why it is so important to me that we invest in the relationships and the strategies to do this right. There is a role for everyone in defending our democracy. And I can tell you, I have been trying to get this awareness out all over the place. The eyes of the nation are on North Carolina right now. People are watching what you are doing, and you are inspiring people. When times are hard, that's when we get to prove our mettle. And I know that North Carolina Democrats right now are doing what needs to be done to inspire an entire nation to fight for what we believe in and to fight to make sure that every eligible voter gets heard. So thank you. I hope I've answered some of your questions. I hope that you hear the gratitude that is from my marrow oozing out of every pore. That you all trust me, that you all are standing with me. I feel so optimistic about the work that's in front of us, and it's work, but I feel so optimistic about where this is going because you all have been building with me and standing arm in arm with me. And I'm deeply, deeply grateful for each and every one of you.
Thank you so much, Justice Riggs. I know that you might have to hop off. There are some questions in the chat box, but only if you have time to take them. Okay. I am going to pause for a Q&A. We will have Kat Lawson, our voter protection and director for the state party, also come on. But can you just reiterate for people, why wouldn't we start curing ballots immediately?
And also, let me say, I see so many kind comments in the chat, and I normally like to heart and respond to as many as I can. And oh my gosh, there's just too many of them. So here's the thing. What I worry about and what we're trying to make sure is that this is not a cure process like curing a provisional ballot. And so we need every person's updated or new voter registration to be able to link back to the vote that they cast in November. If we do that wrong, if we can't connect the voter with the vote they cast, there is a risk that we create more problems, that we don't, in fact, cure the ballots, because there's actually nothing wrong with the ballots. There's nothing to cure. This isn't a provisional ballot that needed ruling upon. I guess if you're being technical in some ways, what needs to be cured is it doesn't. What allegedly needs to be cured is a registration. We are building this airplane as we fly it. It is not something that has happened before. So we're dealing with questions like what happens to the people who died since Election Day? We have 11 million people in this state. Those voters who voted on Election Day were eligible voters. If they passed, what do we do? We're dealing with folks who may have moved since the election or may be in a new county. So when they register, it is technically a new registration. So what we're saying to folks is, wait, let's make sure the process that's being put in place allows the voters who are doing what They didn't do anything wrong to begin with. They're doing some unnecessary extra work, and you're trying to help them do it. But what we don't want is that new information to not be able to be connected to the vote that they cast. And so this is a moment where doing it right matters more than doing it quickly. And I know we have enough time to do it right and get it done in time.
Thank you, Justice Riggs. Just so everyone is clear on that too, 15 days does not apply. We are not in that period. Just scary numbers that they were throwing at us for a second, but we are following up with it. And Justice Riggs has already filed an appeal process to that too. Do you, Justice Riggs, can you walk us through how the specific data regarding the 65,000 names were compiled? How did they come up with these sets of voters?
So this is where it's really helpful that I used to be a voting rights attorney and did a lot of election administration, and the universe or God or whatever higher being you believe in, I feel like put me in this moment because I have some unique skills here. Our elections data is held in what's called a state election information system. It's called SEAMS. You may hear people talk about SEAMS. It's a big database, and it's old. The State Board of Elections has been asking the legislature for more money to update SEAMS for years and years and years and years, and the Republicans in the General Assembly have said no. So this system, you run queries on data, and it's not like a supercomputer. It's like a dated piece of software. It's reliable. It's just like, when you have an older computer, you can't do quite the same updated technology as you would. It's nothing that the state board is doing wrong. It's nothing that the Board of Elections are doing wrong, but not you can run a query on this program that doesn't recognize some of the old data that exists in some of these old applications. And so on initial look, my opponent said, oh, well, I see 68,000 people who don't have social security numbers or driver's licenses associated with their voter registration. And then the state board with more time said, no, well, if you look in these other places, there's 30,000 of them where that data does exist. And that's not even the data that's kept at the county level. The county has all the paper registrations. And so shout out to Duke young students who did a ton of registration this year. We have examples of voter registration forms in Durham County where the paper forms absolutely have driver's licenses and social security numbers on it. And our election workers, whether it was a handwriting issue, a transcription issue, or just things happen because humans run elections, it didn't somehow end up living in this one place in the state in SEAMS. So bottom line is at least 30,000 of the 60,000 people have that data. It's just wasn't accessible when my opponent was making spurious challenges to voters. But we're working to make sure that there are systems in place to query all of the different places the data could live, and that the county boards have the support that they need to look at their paper files. Because if a voter's information is right, I don't want them to have to go do any extra work. They're good to go. And so I want to make sure that there's not new information introduced. We're very cognizant that the county boards of elections are getting swamped with requests for information right now. And these are folks who are good public servants. They are running our elections systems with their overwork and underpaid, and thank an election worker next time you see one. But we're trying to be really sensitive that the election workers aren't the bad guys. They may not have all the answers just yet because this has never happened before. So we're all trying to give each other a little bit of grace and gather the data together. I know that might have been a little bit wonky. I'm sorry. Kat Lawson is also super expert on all of these things, so she can dig more in depth with y'all if you want to, but I may have already gone too far, but I guess the point of it is that these are complicated solutions that we're trying to create and figure out, and as we also fight in a courtroom. And so that's where the kinds of work that we've been doing nonstop for the last 3 days and really longer, but um, the cure process that the Court of Appeals created wasn't one that the parties asked for.
And Justice Riggs, one more question if you've got time for it.
Yes.
Okay. How do you invalidate one election, but not the entire ballot?
Yeah. That's one of the most common questions I get. And I'll tell you right now, you're not going to be satisfied with my answer because there isn't a good answer to that question. On paper, what my opponent says is, well, nobody challenged the Trump-Harris race in North Carolina. Nobody challenged the Stein Robinson race. This is the only one that's been challenged. Okay, it doesn't explain how my mom, who is on the list, she registered using her military ID. She went to vote for her daughter this year and presented her North Carolina driver's license. My mom is like, but I showed my driver's license. And I was like, I know, Mom. The folks who want to silence you don't seem to care about those facts. But she's like, well, I don't understand. Like, what about my vote for Kamala Harris? I voted for Kamala Harris. Is that getting tossed too? And I was like, that's not what my opponent is asking. He is asking the court to, in my race only, literally just subtract these 68,000 votes from the vote count. But so that doesn't answer your question, I'm sure, because it's not a good answer. And the problem it creates is that we set up a system where disappointed candidates, disappointed politicians get to pick and choose not only what votes count, but in what races. So you can imagine a situation where you start seeing in every race where a Democrat wins, we see what's happening to me, happening to them, even though, like, hey, Republicans are fine. And we do not try to disenfranchise voters. So I've also heard, well, why don't we do that to them? Because that's not what we stand for. We stand for the fundamental right to vote. We are going to fight back. I have no problem fighting back and throwing punches that need to be thrown, but we're not going to do it in a way that lacks integrity. We're not going to try and disenfranchise voters. We can win and keep the moral high ground at the same time. And all I can say is there's never going to be a good answer to that question, even though it's the most common question I get. And with people ask you, you should say, this is why we're fighting so hard, so that politicians and people in power can't pick and choose which races they challenge and which votes they count.
Thank you so much, Justice Riggs. We deeply, deeply appreciate how hard that you've been fighting, and we know that this has not been easy on you whatsoever. And I hope that from the almost 2,000 people on this call tonight, you get the love and the uplift that you're going to need to make it through this next week, because Justice Riggs still holds her seat on the Supreme Court right now. For anybody on this call that may be questioning that, what's happening in the meantime, we still have 2 Democratic justices on the Supreme Court with Justice Riggs and Justice Anita Earls. And so to recap for everybody, and just make it clear, we are not going to be phone banking tonight. We are not reaching out to voters right now that have been part of the Griffin list. We are trying to let people know if they are on it so that they can mobilize quickly to cure their ballots. And Justice Riggs, one last question, because I think it's helpful for folks that have been, over the last couple of months, if people have found out they're on the list, they may have gone up to their local board of elections and already done something to correct their ballots. What happens, and is that helpful? And what should people be thinking about if they've already done something along these lines?
So that's what we're also asking again through proper channels. Like I'm in litigation, so like I just want people to know we're doing this by the books. We want some way for voters to be able to check the status of their cure. So, when you get a provisional ballot, you get a number and you're able to go online and check the status of your provisional ballot. In 2020, we got that for the first time ever for absentee ballots, which is where it was called ballot tracks. You could go in to a system online and check the status of your absentee ballot. That's super helpful, right? It doesn't exist for this because this has never happened before. So we're working to figure out if a similar portal can be created. I know some people have gone online to the DMV, if they're a driver's license customer, have gone on to DMV and like updated their voter registration. We're working on figuring out if we can get something that allows the voter who did that, who took the action or went to the county board of election to close the loop and say, yes, I'm good now. It doesn't exist as of yet. So that's one of the struggles, right? And like one of the reasons why we want to get answers to questions that we know voters are going to have, and make sure that those systems are in place, so that we can do this. But there's a stay in effect. We have time to get these answers and to do this right. We know we're going to have to reach out to military and overseas voters too, and that is going to take a little bit longer, but we have the time. Y'all cured so many ballots in 9 days, and that was like the kind of curing that takes trips to county boards of elections. Like I have not 1 ounce of doubt in my body that we can do this in 15 days if we have to. Like, even at scale, this is a bigger scale than we've ever done before. This is something that we can do, and we're going to do it right, and we're going to do it in a way that gives voters confidence that we're getting them the answers they need and getting everything fixed. So I'll just say, as I jump off to my next thing, 2,000 people on a webinar on a Monday night when it's rainy and it's been a long weekend, and just, oh my gosh, I am so lucky to be in relationship with you. I am so lucky to have the support of this NC Democratic Party, all of you on the ground, folks from not even North Carolina. I know we're going to have the person power to get this done. Thank you for listening to us explain how we're doing it. We're all big believers in transparency. We're explaining how we're going to do it. Y'all, we're giving each other grace because we're building a plane as we fly it. And democracy is not going to die on our watch. I can promise you that.
Thank you so much, Justice Riggs. And as Justice Riggs hops off, we so appreciate y'all can put in your chat box and give her final push of love and everything she's going to need to get her through this week. And Kat Lawson is going to come up here with me, and we are going to continue answering questions. And I'm also going to walk you all through what are the action steps for what's next. If we're not calling people right now, what are the best ways in which that you all can help amplify what's happening in North Carolina, and also stay ready on command to mobilize at a moment's notice when we need to pull everyone back together again, to Justice Riggs's point, if we have to go through and how we have to structure this cure process if we come to it. So thank you so much, Justice Riggs. And Kat, hello. Kat Lawson is our fantastic voter protection director for the state party. Kat, if you could walk everyone through what happens now and where do we go from here?
Yeah. So there's a couple different things that are going to happen now, and some of those things are happening in the courts. Some of them are going to be happening in the background, but we want to make sure that you all understand what you can be expecting to hear from the Democratic Party, what you can be expecting to hear from the courts, from the cases as these processes keep going. So as Justice Riggs just said, right, we have a stay in this case. So what that means is that the Supreme Court said, and for whatever reason, Griffin decided not to oppose this request, which is like the first normal thing he's done in this entire process. The Supreme Court said, we're going to stop the Court of Appeals order. We're going to stop this cure process from even starting until after the decision has been reached in the North Carolina Supreme Court. So the 15-day timeline hasn't started happening. All the things necessary before the 15-day countdown to start hasn't started happening. So instead, we're going to wait for the briefing schedule from the North Carolina Supreme Court. We're going to have an oral argument in front of the North Carolina Supreme Court. When that happens, we will either be packing that gallery or we will be hosting a live watch along all together. And after that happens, then we will wait for the opinion to come from the North Carolina Supreme Court. At that point, right, we've got two more diverging paths. We know that we cannot really expect much from our current Supreme Court. Justice Newby and the other Republicans on the court have demonstrated over and over and over again that party is more important to them than voters, is more important to them than the Constitution and then the rule of law. And so we don't have a lot of confidence there. However, the Fourth Circuit has already told us that the federal issues, the constitutional rights that are implicated by this case, deserve a hearing in federal court. So when we are done in front of the North Carolina State Supreme Court, if we lose in front of the North Carolina Supreme Court, right, we are going to go into federal court. We will not be done. The lawyers will continue writing their briefs and making their arguments, and we're going to go through this whole entire process in the federal court. And we believe that we will prevail in front of the Fourth Circuit. On the procedural side, right, the wonky, scary timelines that kind of blow up at us side, right, the North Carolina Supreme Court might try to trigger off this cure process again. But there are still things that would need to happen before the 15-day countdown started. So before that could happen, a mandate from the court would have to issue and go back down to the Superior Court. The Superior Court would then have to tell the state board to come up with processes and come up with instructions to the county boards. The state board would then have to have a formal process where it decided, one, identify to everybody who are the voters whose files are actually missing this information. Because as Justice Riggs explained, it's not all 60-odd thousand, right? A lot of those voters actually do have their information. It's just a bad database problem. So we're going to need the state board to say, here are the voters, right, who are eligible for a cure process. And they're going to have to say, here's the process that's going to be appropriate. Then the county boards will have to actually take those processes and implement them. At that point, the county boards would be the one to send out some form of formal notice to all of the voters in that county. And that is when our 15 business day countdown would start. So even in a worst case scenario where we're pursuing litigation, but something is also happening at the same time in this kind of insane process, and we're going to be able to have some warning, we're going to have knowledge about what that's going to look like and points of advocacy along the way. It would be truly shocking if there was not also a stay while we pursued review in federal court. It would shock the conscience. It would be totally contrary to everything, right? To not have this process stopped while litigation was still getting itself worked out, right? And you can understand just how shocking it would be for a stay to not be issued by understanding that the Supreme Court here, as partisan as it is, still issued a stay. Right? It's that normal, it's that expected that it was just beyond the pale, right? For them to not issue the stay here. So we do think that legally, right, we are going to be able to hold off from needing to do this process. However, if we have to do this process, there will be a lot of notice, and trust, y'all will hear from us. When we are ready to activate you, you will get activated. Because what's happening behind the scenes right now, we are not waiting for the worst case scenario to happen before we plan how we're going to handle that worst case scenario. We have active planning and conversations that have been going on already that are getting ramped up now with our C3 and our C4 partners, our advocacy groups, our county parties, volunteers from around the country who want to help us. There will be opportunities for volunteers in state, volunteers out of state, for phone banking and calls. There will be so very many opportunities. And what we are going to have ready to go if needed is a full process that will run with clear communication, excellent trainings, flawless data as much as as it is in our power. And we are going to make sure that, as Justice Riggs said, we're playing it smart, right? Speed can be helpful sometimes. This is not one of those cases. There are too many contingencies and there are too many risks for misinformation for us to move before we know what we're doing. And one thing I really want to commend you all on, y'all are some of our favorite people because you are in the weeds here. You are paying attention. You heard about a Court of Appeals opinion on Friday and exploded our inboxes and our text messages and our NCDP hotline. Y'all were on it. Most voters are not that way, right? Most voters are too concerned with how they are with the cost of living going on, with how the tariffs are impacting their business, with all the chaos that's happening federally. And so we can't give them misinformation because if we lose their attention or we violate their trust by giving them bad info, they're not going to listen to us a second time. So you all, right, are the exception to the rule. You all are willing to follow us along in the chaos that is this process. Most voters aren't. And so that's why we ask you to keep directing and giving us your enthusiasm and your energy. Know that we will tell you how to direct that in a way that is going to be helpful for voters and not hurtful in this process. And with that, we have a lot of different things that you can be doing. And I'll turn it back to Anderson for that, or we'll have Q&A and I will get more into the weeds as needed.
Mm-hmm. Becca, if you could, because I know folks do have to hop at 7 o'clock. And so what I'm going to do is we're going to go through how to take action right now and what you can be doing. We've got a social media toolkit that we're going to pump out to people. I know folks have been asking in the chat box, how do we let people know what the hell is going on? We're going to give you that information too, and being able to help push out and amplify. So Becca, if you could share, Catherine, if you could share slides, one of the two. So number one, you've seen it pop in the chat box a lot. Please, number one, be sharing the griffinlist.com. It is the most effective and efficient way for someone to search if they are on the list, and being able to have someone that says, I'm identified, I know I'm on the list, and being able to reach out to them at a moment's notice and let them know what they need to do once and if we have the full process for a cure in place from the State Board of Elections with strong legal guidance on that, we will do so. Again, to Kat's point, we want to make sure we do this correctly and we want to do this right. And so making sure that people go to the griffinlist.com is the best way to check and see if you're on the list. And number two, the next thing that you can do is sign up with us at ncdp.org/protectthevote. This is going to be our rapid response form for anyone that at a moment's notice can make phone calls, can come to North Carolina potentially, can help us do anything on the ground that we're going to need. We are also going to be sending out text messages to anyone that signs up through this, not to ask you for $1, to be honest with y'all, but to be able to ask you to do something at the end of this, depending on what that looks like. But our rapid response program is going to be strong, at least on this issue, and making sure that we're giving updates along the way of when a decision comes out and how folks can get involved in the future too, with any sort of action that we need from you all. So number one, sharing the griffinlist.com. Number two, signing up at ncdp.org/protectthevote. And we'll send all of this out in a follow-up email afterwards to you all as well. And then the third thing that you all can do is share on social media and uplift and amplify. And so we're going to be doing a Pack the Gallery, as Kat said, so stay tuned to hear from that. And then the next slide, if you don't mind flipping it one more time, Catherine, is going to be amplifying on social media. So ncdp.org/signs is how you can go and post graphics. You can tag us in them. Please make sure that you're amplifying what's already on NCDEM socials and also what is on Justice Riggs's socials. We do want to get this trending. Folks are asking, why is this not more national news? It got on the down ballot today. It was on the Bulwark earlier this week. Like, it's getting out there to folks, but it was on the New York Times Daily Blast the other day. And so we are trying to make sure that it stays in people's minds as we go through this process, because again, Republicans, the process that they are using is trying to make people forget about what's happening. And we are not going to let them forget that people across the country are paying attention to what's happening in North Carolina. And we know that this is being utilized as a Republican playbook to take into other states to deny elections in 2026 and in 2028. Make no mistake, this is Project 2025 at a state level. It is the Cleto Rita Mitchell election integrity network brainchild from 2020 that Donald Trump and Republicans have now pushed into the state of North Carolina to see if they can push it into other states. If you want to defeat Donald Trump in 2026, you start with North Carolina and this Supreme Court justice fight in 2025. And I'm so excited that all of you are on here to be able to do that with us tonight. I thank you for getting on and giving us your time. But again, those are the action steps that we have right now. We are going to keep you updated though, because like we said earlier, we're going to need every single person's help to be able to fight this. And so I'm just really, really grateful. I know Justice Riggs expressed it earlier, but I'm so grateful for the opportunity and for all the folks that we have on this call. And I'm going to bring up now also our first Vice Chair, Jonah Garson, who is also a lawyer in his day life and his earlier capacities. And so we're going to answer questions in the chat box now for folks that may have additional ones that are coming through if any of this tonight was not clear to you all. But again, the 3 action steps we want you to take is number 1, thegriffinlist.com. 2, signing up on ncdp.org/protectthevote and sharing on social media. ncdp.org/signs is the best way to get involved and to make sure that you're amplifying in every way what's happening in the state right now. And so I'm going to look through the chat box and I'm going to pull up some questions too.
I want to lift up one question I'm seeing, Chair Clayton and Kat. So I think a lot of people are asking questions that get at what has been your work to reach out to these effective voters before this point. And I want folks to understand we have done a ton of work ourselves and with our partners. But can you describe some of that work?
Yeah, so one of the major things that we've been doing that you all originally signed up for was phone banking. So we've been doing phone banking. We've been doing community kind of outreach to the folks who are on the list, not to tell them how to cure their list, but to their cure, right, their registration, but to tell them, hey, did you know, right, that you're on this list? Will you agree that we can reach out to you when we know if there's something for you to do? Will you share your story? And it's remained true that for most people, when we do reach them, their answer is like, I had no idea. So like a lot of the voters on this list still don't know. So having those calls be made regularly, that outreach done to inform people, and they get mad. Because also there are Republicans on this list. And when they get told that, you know, Griffin is trying to throw out their vote too, they're not happy. So those phone banks are regularly occurring. You can find them on our Mobilize. That's what tonight was before Friday happened and everything changed.
Pat, there's a question that says people may be re-registering and then accidentally disenfranchising their votes. How are we addressing this?
So if you update your registration, you're not disenfranchising yourself, right? You are making sure that you are not going to be eligible for this kind of challenge in 2025, 2026, and on. So updating your registration through the DMV or at your county board of elections is a completely fine thing to do prospectively. We just don't have any guarantee that it's going to apply retroactively for your 2024 vote. So, which is why we can't tell people that that's what they should be doing and that then they can just forget about it and move on. So go ahead and do it if you want. It'll help for 25 and 26. But if you are still on that list at the end of this process, your county board will be reaching out. We will be reaching out. And so updating your registration will not disenfranchise you.
Kat, can you talk a little bit about UCAVA voters and how they factor into this? And what UCAVA voters are for people on here that are like, what are you talking about?
Yes, all of the fun acronyms. So UOCAVA voters are overseas voters. So these are military voters, aid workers, right? Children of aid workers living abroad. And so UOCAVA voters vote through a special online system, or they send in a physical mail-in ballot from overseas. Most of them do the online portal that is managed by the State Board of Elections. And so the challenge to their votes is a little bit different from the voter registration that makes up most of the Griffin list. The UOCAVA voters, Griffin is claiming that, well, they weren't exempted from the photo ID requirement that North Carolina now had, and that because they didn't email in a picture, I guess, of their passport, that their vote doesn't count. So part of the same order from the Court of Appeal says that those UOCAVA voters, those overseas voters, will somehow have to send in some form of photo ID to the state board in order to just tick that box. has all the same problems as the voter registration challenges, right? You can't change the rules after an election. You can't do it to some overseas voters and not all overseas voters without violating equal protection. Also, part of my legal practice before was data privacy and security. I don't know how on earth you expect a couple thousand overseas folks to send in sensitive photo ID information online to the state board. That's going to be part of the whole process. But yes, for the overseas voters, the challenge to them is a little bit different.
Hey, Kat, what is UOCAVA for folks who might not have heard that acronym before?
Uniformed and overseas active voters.
It's an
Y'all,
acronym.
there's so many.
Y'all.
It's an
It's about the
acronym. It's an
overseas
acronym.
folks.
It's overseas voters for all kinds of reasons. Military, you work abroad, you're an aid worker, you're a missionary, all of the things. You're just voting from overseas. You're on an extended vacation and we're all wildly jealous of you.
Someone said in the chat box, I just put in griffinlist.org and it said this site can't be reached. That is correct because that is not the right site. It is thegriffinlist.com, thegriffinlist.com. And if you do not put the in front of it, you will not get the correct site. Just to let everyone know that and be clear on thegriffinlist.com, ncdp.org/protect the vote, and ncdp.org/signs.
And shout out to all of my very helpful people in the chats. The Uniformed and Overseas Citizens Absentee Voting Act. That is what UOCAVA stands for. Thank you.
Let's see. If the state board has data, Kat, for maybe half of the amount of people that are on the list and they're being challenged, will they still need curing then?
So the idea is that no, that the state board will take the list that Griffin provided, that he identified. The state board will then go through and say, okay, of the 68,000 of them, we actually do have a driver's license number or a social security number for 32,000 of them. So only the remaining ones are eligible to be challenged under his theory here, right? All of which is nonsense, all of which we reject, but in this universe, right? In the bad place where we all might be, that's what would happen. So the state board would identify essentially he had faulty data because there's only so much that you can publicly get, right? Obviously, the state board is not handing out people's socials and driver's license when you do RFIs, requests for information. And so, yeah, so the state board would reduce that number and we would only be then targeting the people whose files legitimately did not include those numbers.
I just wanted to lift up, we have another URL with great resources that we put together today. That is ncdp.org/Griffin-toolkit. I'll put that in the chat again. And that has good talking points, everything.
Kat, one thing that I know folks have been paying attention to is that, last December, if anybody followed North Carolina closely, the North Carolina Democrats broke the Republican supermajority in the state house. And we were so excited. Big shout out to Representative Lindsey Prather, Brian Kahn, Dante Pittman, fantastic people that we had that gave us back power, especially for our Democratic governor, Josh Stein. But we also saw Republicans in the state legislature pass Senate Bill 382, shoved down the throats of people in the dead of night when they realized they were going to lose their power in the legislature instead of helping the people in Western North Carolina. And Senate Bill 382 did something very interesting where it stripped the power away from the governor in North Carolina to be able to appoint Board of Elections members and to take away the control from the state Board of Elections from the Democratic Party with the governor's office. So can you talk about right now, when does the state BOE turn over to being a Republican majority and what's happening with that right now?
Yes. So for those of you who, don't closely follow state administrative actions, the way that elections in North Carolina are organized is we have an independent board of elections at the state level. That board is comprised of 5 people. 2 people get to be appointed by the Republican Party, 2 people get to be appointed by the Democratic Party, and then the chair gets to be appointed by whoever is the governor, right? So which means that when Democrats win the governor's seat, we get 3 total Democrats. And that is true then for all of the 100 county boards of elections. So we have had 3-2 majority control over the state board of elections and county boards of elections. Well, obviously Republicans don't like things that they can't control. And so they changed that with SB 382. So what they did instead was they said, aha, we lost the governor's seat. We lost the lieutenant governor's seat. We also weren't able to get rid of Elaine Marshall, right, who is just winning all the things and keeping her seat. So we can't do what we initially planned to do. So we're going to find and replace the bill we first wrote to put that office in charge of the boards of election. And instead, we're going to make it the auditor's office, because that was one of the ones we actually managed to win. And so it would then say Republicans get 2 seats, Democrats get 2 seats, and the auditor gets to appoint the chair, right, all the way down, effectively changing the county boards and the state board from a 3 to Democrat-controlled elections agencies to Republican-controlled agencies. So here's where we're at right now. At the moment, the current members of the Board of Elections for the state at the state level, their terms expire at the end of the month, and they need to be reappointed. And that would happen with the auditor, and we would lose our democratic control over it. Now, there is a existing lawsuit from Governor Stein challenging, right, SB 382, saying that it violates the powers of the governor under the North Carolina Constitution to move around this agency and to remove his appointment power. And so that case has now been set for oral argument. So they're going to have a hearing on whether or not all of these processes should be stopped while litigation goes on, right? So it's another case where we're going to look for a stay. Unfortunately, we're going to go right up to the wire for this. The oral argument in that case, the hearing in front of Superior Court judges is it's scheduled for, I believe, in the second to last week of April. The 3-judge panel has said they will issue an opinion by April 1st. So truly right up to the deadline. And so that is a little bit of the background that we are dealing with, though, as we are anticipating, right, all of these different challenges and changes.
Before folks hop, there might be some folks, I think there are, who are saying, why so many RNC resources on a state Supreme Court race? For those folks, and maybe some folks outside of North Carolina who don't understand the context of why they care so much, Kat, Chair Clayton, would you fill folks in about why this is such a high-profile race and battleground in North Carolina?
Because the type of people that Jefferson Griffin and the voters that he's challenging with the 60,000, it is up to 67,000 voters right now, a little bit over it, because there are 60,000 voters that relate to the driver's license or social security number that you may be missing from your voter registration form. But also there are overseas voters that are being challenged. There's a select group of about 200 voters that are being challenged because they are children of military or military personnel who have not or been in North Carolina, but they have a residence in North Carolina. They are either overseas with their parents right now serving or on a military base somewhere, or that is why they're being challenged. And so the aspect is that the majority, though, of these voters, 60,000, is a part of a voting block that can be taken through every other state in the country. They're called HAVA voters. HAVA voters exist throughout every state. The Help Americans Vote Act was passed in 2002. And Kat, I'll let you talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah. And also to correct what I said April 1st. It's already been April 1st, May 1st. We will get a decision on that injunction by May 1st. So yes. The theory that the Republicans are running with, that the RNC is running with, they came up with this theory before Griffin. They first filed lawsuits claiming that registrations were flawed, and they challenged 225,000 voters in North Carolina, saying that their voter registration forms were missing. Their files were missing either a social security number or a driver's license number, and that they all needed to be kicked off the list. They were told by a federal judge, look, we're going to take our time to figure this out. You cannot use this reasoning to kick off voters in 2024. I'm not going to do it. It's too close to the election. And so they then just turned around and said, okay, bet. And they went to the state courts because they know that the state courts are more favorable to them. And they know that they can keep on repackaging, right, this same broken theory until it's going to get approved. And then once they get one judge to approve it, once they get one Supreme Court to approve it, they get to then go into another state and say, see, this is a completely legitimate theory. This court already said so, right? This is the danger of a precedent-driven legal system where you start being able to apply a fallacy of, well, look, this other person already said my theory is legit. And in intellectually honest endeavor, that can be a really good thing. That's not what we have here, right? We have partisan motivated decision-making happening here, and it is part of a coordinated, planned effort, which is why this theory was launched by the RNC, picked up by Griffin and the North Carolina Democrats, reiterated by the RNC. After Griffin's protest, the RNC filed another lawsuit in Wake County Superior Court instead of in federal court, saying, actually, yes, we think that Griffin is right, see our other lawsuit, and that we should kick off all of these voters, but we actually want you to do it for all of the races. We want to recalculate the totals for everybody all the way down, right? Because they just keep tweaking this theory because all they really want is chaos. They want to win, and if they can't win, they're going to cause chaos. They're going to cause a massive failure of trust in the system, because that's something that they can exploit, because they run on fear. They run on motivating people by being afraid, by being panicked. And it's hard. It's hard to be institutionalists, right? Who also think that things need to be reformed, right? We need to do better with voting rights. We need to do better with voting access. None of that means that this is the way to do it, right? None of it means that people should distrust our elections administrators, right? They are doing their damnedest. They're doing their best when they're underfunded and overworked and increasingly the targets of attacks and doxing and other kinds of efforts. And so really North Carolina is a favorable pool for the RNC to play in right now because of the General Assembly and because of the Supreme Court, which is why it's so important that we keep doing the work to get our legislators elected, to keep the ones we've got who did such a great job in 24, to get more in 2026, to keep Anita Earls on the Supreme Court in 26, and then to flip the court on 28. It has to be done.
And here's to follow up on that last point Kat made, and this is something that we want you to take away, even if you have no experience with battleground North Carolina work before. In North Carolina, our state Supreme Court is the top of the ticket. Why? It's because when we had a Democratic majority on that state Supreme Court prior to 2022, we had a majority that said partisan gerrymandering is unconstitutional under our state constitution. When Republicans took control of the court back in 2022, they reversed themselves in an unprecedented reversal, and they said partisan gerrymandering fine under our state constitution. Well, there were some major national consequences to that. If we had fair congressional maps, if we had congressional maps that weren't drawn with partisan or racial gerrymandering, we would have a pretty even split in our congressional delegation, which means we would have a Hakeem Jeffries as speaker or a Democratic speaker, right? And so Republicans know that in battleground North Carolina, our state Supreme Court is a strategic imperative. And we all want you to remember that as you begin to hear talk about North Carolina being the biggest U.S. Senate battle in 2026. Remember that here in North Carolina, our long-term strategy says you got to pay attention to the courts always.
And with that, I'm going to wrap us up for the evening. I know folks have got to hop off, and I appreciate everybody for giving us an hour and 10 minutes of their time. If you all hopped on here late, let me tell you what. Number one, we're going to send out this recording to everybody. So if you were like, wow, y'all went into a lot and I could not comprehend some of it, that's okay. Number one, the things that you need to know, the 15-day process for cure is not in effect right now. Number two, there is a stay in this case at this moment in time, and we are going to be able to come back to folks and tell you all when the next Supreme Court hearing will be on this case, and making sure that we keep you all updated and following along. And the reason why we are not starting a cure process yet is because we want to make sure we have the most accurate data, information, so that we do not waste time. We contact every voter that we need to, and we understand that the plan behind this is to make sure that Democrats ultimately maintain their victory in this fight. And so we want to be strategic, and we want to make sure the process is correct. But I appreciate the energy because it is expensive. It is a big fight. And so the one plug that we have not made tonight much, but I know you all have been popping in the chat box with, is how can you help us monetarily with this? You can go to ncdp.org/protect, and it gives money to the Joint Judicial Fund that we have with Justice Riggs and with Justice Earls to help us with our Supreme Court fight. You can also go to Justice Riggs's website to donate to her campaign directly right now as well. We deeply, deeply appreciate the support that we're getting from across the country, and we're going to need it over the next few months because we know that this case could be drawn out over the next 6 to 8 months, but we are fully anticipating and ready to fight it. And so just to make sure that you all feel good about updates that are coming out from us, we are going to be giving rapid responses, and we will also be doing more information calls like this. I'm sorry that we did not get to phone bank tonight, but I do appreciate the willingness of people across the country to come together and say that we want to protect democracy across every state, especially in the South, where, to Jonah's point, North Carolina has so much to give to the Democratic Party nationally if we are able to succeed in this Supreme Court fight right now. And it is why Republicans are trying to disenfranchise it, because they have a plan to hold a full Republican majority on our state Supreme Court, and we will certainly not let them. And we're excited about being in the fight with you all. And so thank you all for being here. Again, we're going to send up a wrap-up email. We are also going to send out the recording to this call so you all will have the information that you need, and also the talking point guideline that's out with our toolkit right now for folks that may want to get on there and talk about it. I also saw some folks look and say, is there a video or something that we can share on the internet right now? Justice Riggs has made posts from her account. There's also one from me that's on my social media as well that you can look to for a template if you want to make it and share it on your own social media and use that as sort of a script for you all to use as well. More than welcome to. We would love to have you do it and talk to your own communities in your voice about what's happening right now and how fucked up it is, quite frankly. So thank you all for being on here with us tonight. Thank you to the NCDP staff. I apologize again about our delay at the beginning, but I am just so grateful that over almost 2,000 folks from across the country wanted to join us tonight. So grateful to you all, and thank you so much.